Good afternoon and welcome to the Grant Professionals Association's webinar. This webinar is titled Let's Get Down to Business, a case study of a small business engagement. My name is Kelly Romero and I am the Membership Director for GPA and your webinar moderator for today. You are placed in listen-only mode, which means that your line is muted. If you would like to ask a question, please feel free to use the chat box on the left side of your screen to submit your questions or raise your hand and we'll get your line unmuted. We will get to as many questions as time permits throughout the webinar. You should have received the copies of the slides in the email invite as well as the handouts. The email invite is where you receive the dial-in information. The handouts and the slides are located on the right side of that email under deliverables and materials. At the end of the webinar, you will be directed to a brief survey, and we ask that you please stay with us until the end to fill it out and assist us with our future webinars. Today's presenters are Micki Vandeloo and Rachel Werner. Micki has over 10 years experience writing grants and specializes in for-profit grant writing. She also provides training and coaching services to new grant writers and nonprofits wishing to increase or establish their internal grant writing capacity. She has obtained over $12 million in grant funding for both for-profit and nonprofit clients. Micki published the book, The For-Profit Grant Writing Guide, in 2014. She is a Grant Professionals Foundation's board member and is the president of the St. Louis chapter of GPA. Rachel Werner, owner and CEO of RBW Strategy, has over 13 years of grants, consulting, communications, writing, strategic planning, training, and project management experience. Rachel's career has spanned the corporate, nonprofit, and public sectors. She provides support to clients on the full life cycle of grants activities and proposal development, project management, and strategic planning. Since the beginning of her career, she has helped to garner over $16 million in grants and contracts. While serving as a management consultant, she was considered a grants subject matter expert with Deloitte Consulting, LLP's federal services practice, where she supported federal grant-making organizations in the areas of full grants lifecycle, project management, business process improvement, and policy development. A sample project required the management of grant programs to distribute $2 billion in federal funds to state and local entities. She has also served as a grants management specialist implementing a compliance system for large U.S. Department of Ed, No Child Left Behind funds within charter schools across the U.S. She graduated from Vassar College with a Bachelor in Arts and received a master's degree in public administration from New York University's Wagner School of Public Service. She has also obtained a certificate in grants management, is a certified project management specialist, and is a certified grants professional. She is actively involved in the GPA and conducts trainings at national and local conferences. We welcome both of you ladies, and thank you so much for taking your time out to present this today. Dial *7 to unmute your line and begin your presentation.
Well, thanks, Kelly. This is Micki Vandeloo. I'm really happy to have everybody on the line today. I really hope that everybody can get a lot out of this. I think this is a great webinar idea because I know a lot of you have possibly been curious about small business engagements and how as grant professionals we can engage with small businesses. And the reason that this whole thing came about, and you'll hear more about this through the presentation, was a situation that Rachel and I had with a small business, I guess a little less than a year ago. And it kind of brought to mind that, you know, all the things that we can do and how it isn't always necessarily about grant writing. So we're going to talk about that a lot more in the next hour. So Kelly did a great job of introducing us, but before we get started, I do want to ask everyone to please fill out this brief poll. So we want to know who the audience is here. So what I want to know is, have you worked for a small business? Have you written grants for a small business? Or do you have no experience with small businesses and writing grants? So you can select more than one option here, by the way, because I know there could be more than one situation for you. We'll give everybody a couple minutes here to just cast their vote. Okay, so So it looks like the majority, at least so far, have no experience, with a couple people having worked for a small business and a couple people having written grants for small businesses. So that is very helpful. That helps us to make this a little more customized program and hopefully be able to give you a little bit more targeted information. There's our results. So this is our webinar agenda. So we're going to talk about, first of all, we're going to talk about us. Who doesn't like to talk about themselves, right? But Kelly gave us a very thorough introduction, and we're just going to give a little bit more perspective on where we're coming from. We're going to talk about then why this webinar isn't really about grant writing, which seems odd because we're doing it through the Grant Professionals Association. So you would think that it would be about grant writing, but it is much more about something else. Then Rachel's going to talk about what the client issue was and how we partnered on a solution, as well as lessons learned. And then I'm going to finish up by tips on working with small businesses and questions, and then we'll talk about the handout also that everyone has received. Okay. Then just to go through really quickly, I know that Kelly did my bio and everything, but just a couple things that I would like to highlight. More important, the perspective that I come from than my background and, the different boards I sit on is the fact that I've worked in manufacturing for about a quarter of a century now. I've worked for manufacturers. I've worked for consultants for manufacturers. I worked for companies that sell to manufacturers. I've really worked in a lot of different positions in the manufacturing community. So I have written, a large part of my grant writing is done for manufacturers in the manufacturing community. So those businesses include small businesses. So I have gotten, and being one of the only quote-unquote for-profit grant writers, through GPA I get a lot of calls from small businesses because generally I'm the one that these questions get referred to. Somebody will say, I called the GPA and I got your name. I understand you write grants for for-profit businesses. So I have a lot of conversations that start off that way. But I have been a grant professional since 2010. I started my business in 2013 and also received my GPC that same year. I did write a book, mainly because I saw that so many manufacturers, small businesses really didn't know a lot about grants. So I've really kind of tasked myself with teaching as many people about in the business community, in the small business community, and in the manufacturing community about grants, because I think there's a lot of misinformation out there, and we'll talk about that more in this webinar. I did receive the Pauline Giannarino Award in 2014, and I am a resource for the Human Library this year at the National Conference and was one last year, and that's a lot of fun. So if you get a chance, come see me at the Human Library at the conference. I'd love to see you in person and talk more with you face-to-face. So Rachel, I'll let you take it now.
Okay. Well, thanks, Micki. Thanks, Kelly, for the introduction before. So I'm just going to reiterate a few points because I think that Kelly did a great job covering my bio and, the different experiences that I've had. Like Micki, I kind of came into grants it started out in the nonprofit sector, and then I actually started to get more involved in grants when I was working in the for-profit sector. So while I have been a grants professional since 2003, I think what elevated my experience a bit more was when I started working for Deloitte managing federal grants projects and also became a project management professional 2010. And that really just elevated my experience a bit more to gain a little bit more perspective beyond the nonprofit sector and beyond government organizations, but also into how for-profit companies operate and the different service offerings that they provide, which also just changes the way that, they do business and also the expectations that you have working with them. I started my own business in 2013, which is also the same year that I also became a certified grants professional. And now I'm going to just get a little started on the meat of what we're here to talk about. So as Micki mentioned, we're really not here to talk about grant writing, really here to talk about the resources that you can provide and actually help to strengthen the grant professional network and the resources that you're able to and the content you're able to provide to clients or organizations, and how you can leverage your experience working as a grants professional using different means to do so. So before I talk about the case study, I'll talk a little bit about the importance of partnerships here, because as a consultant, whether you work supporting an organization, whether you're an employee of an organization, one of the key things is the business-to-business collaborations, because in a sense, we're all partners. I have unique strengths, Micki has unique strengths, and so we all build upon each other's strengths in order to ensure that, we can develop a better solution. We each have unique talents. We're each providing some information that'll be a value add to a client or an organization, and it's really what we're there to do. That's part of what GPC is, and, making sure that you ensure some core competencies and that you're providing the best possible solution that you can. And that's one of the reasons that, I reached out to Micki, was because I knew of her expertise in for-profit grant writing, which is something that I didn't have as much experience in. Even though I worked in the corporate sector, for-profit grant writing is a different animal. And also just leveraging, the Grant Professionals Association. The national conference is a great way to connect with other folks who you may, want to learn more about. Some might be experts in grants management. Some might be experts in healthcare applications. So it's just tapping into that potential to see, how you can work together. And I think that we look better, we look more professional, we look more educated when we pull in the right partners and resources who are able to address the needs of the people that we're trying to support. And that really, in the end, a happier client equals, happier consultant. So it's a win-win in the end. Okay, so now I'm going to go talk a little bit more about the case study here. So I was connected to somebody. She's a wellness expert, and she's a small business owner located where I live in the DC area, and she is interested in getting grant funding. And she wanted to help support her organization. She wanted to increase number of low-income and family members and spouses or veterans, military-focused, able to get the services that she was offering. And unfortunately, she's a for-profit organization, so she is not going to be eligible, for as many funds as a 501c3. So she really just needs to be educated. And I think that there's a lot of misconceptions out there about, what for-profits can actually apply for, what are they eligible for. So when she came to me with this knowledge, I knew that Micki had this for-profit grants experience. So what I did was I reached out to her and said, hey, Micki, I have this client, and I described the situation, I described what she was looking to do. And Micki came back and said, yeah, let's talk about this. Let's see if we can get her on a call, really finalize, what she's looking to do, put a proposal together so that we can identify some of the key issues and potential service offerings. So this is when the wheels really start to churn and say, okay, this is going to be a non-traditional client. It's not just writing an application, putting together a task matrix for a federal opportunity. This is actually thinking through and thinking how we can, as grant professionals, leverage our skills to help her and really ensure that she could maximize her potential to reach her goals. And although, I didn't have that for-profit funding experience, I knew that Micki did, and I knew that I could tap her knowledge and expertise in order to go the next step. And so then that's really what set up for the solution. So then this is when we started to talk a little bit further. So we really wanted to just focus on our key strengths. So Micki's obviously strengths were the for-profit funding awareness. She really understood, the space a bit more, market research, for potential for-profit partners. And so she could really tap into, okay, so you may be a 501, you may not be a 501c3, but who might be able to partner with you so that you can still take on your service, but perhaps be a subcontractor to a larger nonprofit who might want to tap into the same network. So doing that research to identify those potential partners. And because this potential client, she was located in the DC area, I have the knowledge of more of the organizations that are based in this area, and also just ability to meet with her, to tap her knowledge, to really identify what her goals were, and just being able to understand the local network. So with the two of our expertise, we identified some service offerings that we thought would be applicable to her. And the first one was a concept paper. So we decided that, the thing that she really wanted to do was to put together her thoughts in sort of a business plan, if you will, to share with potential partners. Here's what I'm looking to accomplish. Here's my goals and objectives. Here's the target population. Here's the social impact. So it sounds familiar because it sort of sounds like a need statement. It sort of sounds like a paper or an application that you would do for potential foundation support. So those are some of the things that we identified so that she could start to articulate what those goals and objectives and collective impact would be, also a timeline for the project. So these are kind of things we wanted her to think through before pursuing any potential partners. And also the next step is going to be nonprofit partner research. And so really it's identifying who are those key partners. So while Micki could identify the type of partner, I could then articulate based on my knowledge of those organizations in the DC area who might be a good fit based on that. And so then identifying some leads, prioritizing them into Tier 1, Tier 2, Tier 3, and also just create a calendar so she can move forward and actually figure out how to do that and how to best cultivate those individuals or those companies, and seeing within her network who would be the best fit. So it sounds a lot like project management, which exactly it is, oversight of those types of activities, which you often do when you're managing collaborative applications or different types of grant projects. And also potential funding prospect research. So in addition to partner collaboration, also looking at potential funders to see who would be interested in serving this type of population. So if this wellness expert was able to leverage the partners that she had, how would then that translate into a potential funding opportunity, and who would be the potential prospects that would be interested in this type of opportunity, supporting this type of initiative. And then the last one would be application. So that would be your straightforward application development and determining, who would be a good fit. And I think that that's it from my end. So I think I'm going to pass it back to Micki.
Okay, so just to clarify, when Rachel and I started working together, basically what we said was she came to me with this person that had a small business, and the one thing I think about when I look at small businesses, and we'll get into just more of these details in a little bit, but I just want to clarify in case people are a little bit confused about what I did versus what Rachel did. Basically, she said, this is what this client does, or the client told me what she did. She told us that she would be open to partnering with a nonprofit. She'd actually thought about that. So when I did the grant research, when I proposed to do the grant research, I said not only will I look for something that is for-profit businesses, I'll look for grant funding opportunities that are partnerships. So that's kind of where, and I think that was restated or misstated in that slide. It should have said I was going to research grant funding opportunities for projects with nonprofit partners, and I think it said for-profit. So I apologize, that was my error in writing it. But basically, one of the things that you will find in working with small businesses is if they have a mission or a direction that can that leaves them open to partnering, that is a good thing, because there are a lot of collaborative grants out there right now, particularly in the educational, health, and wellness space, that encourage collaboration. So maybe the small business itself wouldn't be the main recipient of the grant funding, but maybe they would be a contractor to somebody that's part of that initiative. So, so here's our lessons learned. The first and foremost is identifying the key budget up front is key, especially with small businesses. What I find with small businesses is that a lot of them really want to get a grant, but a lot of them don't have the funding or don't understand the need to pay for getting a grant. I have a lot of people call me and say, I would like to get a grant. I run a small business, and I ask them some questions, and I find out that maybe they have an outcome that is commensurate to getting a grant. Maybe they're hiring people, maybe there's going to be job creation, or maybe there's going to be increased sales or increased outcomes because of the project. But then when I tell them that I can put together a proposal, they stop and they say, well, we really didn't think we'd have to pay anybody to do that. So there is a huge communication process, and I apologize for that. There is a huge communication process that we have to go through with these companies to help them understand how much work grant writing is, what grant writing takes, and how it's not just putting together a letter and sending it off to somebody. It's much more than that. So in this case, the client budget was not there to pay for the work. So we didn't end up engaging with the client. But it is a great lesson learned, is that, and she said from the very beginning, she said, I don't have a lot of money, but I'm hoping at some point I can do this. Well, we still haven't done it. We haven't done the project yet. So, obviously she's still in a position where she can't pay to have it done. But it is good to do that, because the one thing that is, I think, a problem is that sometimes we put a lot of work in, we put a lot of time in sometimes, and at the end we receive nothing for it. And so it's just good to identify that client budget. It's also important to listen to what your client really needs, because this person came to us saying she wanted a grant. Well, after we started asking some questions, we found out that she needed a lot more than just a grant. She needed, like Rachel said, a business plan. She needed some help finding partners. She needed help with articulating with those partners or communicating with those partners, because, again, small businesses, they don't have a lot of resources in that area. So, and then that education component. Sometimes it's a lot of education, letting them know that, yes, you can get a grant for this, but not for this. Also creating an action plan to identify next steps. I thought Rachel did a fantastic job when she put together this proposal at putting together very specifically what would be done as part of the project and what the benefits to the client were going to be. And so literally it was a step-by-step, this is how we're going to get to where you want to go. And I think that's always really important, because if you just give a proposal to a client that says, I will write a grant for you, and there's no other information, especially with small businesses, again, there's that education element. They don't know what comes next. So I find with my for-profit clients, I have to step through exactly what we're going to do. We're going to create a team. We're going to create a timeline. We're going to have calls regularly to stick to that timeline. So you really have to have some sort of an action plan, and the more you can clarify that up front, it means you're going to be in a better shape. You're going to have that client more knowledgeable in general as the process goes along. You also need to make small businesses aware of the grant-seeking realities. Again, a lot of people hear these late-night commercials, hey, get grant funding, free grant funding, and they see their emails that say there's energy tax credits available, just pay us $250 and we'll go out and get money for you. And I actually have I've actually worked with people, small business owners, that have fallen prey to that they've actually paid $250, $500, $750 and gotten nothing for it. So you have a lot of competing voices out there that say, you don't have to do anything, just pay a very small fee and you can get a grant, thousands of dollars, And so I just try to make people aware. Again, it's that education component that says it's competitive. Any grant you go for, you're competing against somebody else, whether it's another small business, whether it's a business or a nonprofit, whether it's, whoever it is, it's competitive. So you may not get a grant. I always tell my clients, I can do all the great work in the world, but if there's a political situation and this is a government grant, it wouldn't matter. You might still not get the grant. So make them aware of the grant-seeking realities. And again, it isn't just about writing the grant. This is a great example of the fact that it is project management, it is education, it is partnership, it is letting people know what's out there and then what they can do to stand the best chance of getting the funding. So the grant writing is secondary to all that. The important part is developing those partnerships and delivering the services that specific client needs to make them grant ready and to help them get the grant. I thought that the point that Rachel made too on partnerships was really good. I have found the grant writing profession to be the most generous and sharing profession that I've ever been in. I can go to any grant writer that I know. I have friends that are federal grant writers. I have friends that do arts and humanities grant writing. I have a really good friend up in Ohio that does a lot of large nonprofit grants. And I've worked with her with some of her nonprofit clients who have for-profit funding ventures. And she calls me when she needs help, but I also call her when I need needs assessment help. So we all have talents, and everybody is willing to share their talents. And I really encourage you to really get to know. If you have a chance to go to the conference, that is a great place to get to know people, to learn more about them, to learn what their specialization is, and then you can help leverage that with your clients. So very important point. And I would like to encourage you to go to the chat box if you do have any questions. We will answer them after the webinar. So then tips for working with small businesses. So I've talked about some of these. I'll just brush over the ones I've talked about already. There are a lot of common small business misconceptions. Again, they think that free money is out there, and that just makes my blood boil when I hear that, because no grant money is free. We all know how much work and how much effort it takes to put together a grant, and I would definitely not call that free. But I do have manufacturers, small businesses that look at me and say, I want some of that free money. There's free money out there. I know I can get it. Definitely an opportunity for education. Funding is available for startup costs. That is a misconception. There is funding, SBIR, STTR funding. You don't have to have an established enterprise. You can actually have a new small business that's research and development oriented, but that's a very specific case. I have found, by and large, any funder, even the state economic development groups who are large for-profit funders, anyone wants to see at least 2 to 3 years of financials before they will even consider giving grant funding to any business. Also, small businesses think every new project is worthy of funding. I had a person call me, I think it was about a year ago, that had started he was an entrepreneur, and he had started a business developing an app for people to play a game, and when they played a game, after they got to a certain score, they could give money to a college student to give them money for college. And so I spent a long time on the phone with this guy. This guy thought this was the most perfect project for grant funding. And I kept trying to get him to understand that there really wasn't a great outcome, because how is somebody going to pick who they're going to give the money to? And so it came back to the fact that it would benefit a very specific group of people. And I said, well, you really have to have a larger impact to get a grant. Well, the guy wasn't satisfied. And he said, well, what if I did this? So people will try to talk you into the fact that their grant is the perfect grant. What it all comes down to in grant funding for for-profit businesses is outcomes, just like nonprofits. But the outcomes are jobs created, jobs retained, people trained. If you're doing investment, it has to have some sort of significant impact to the local economy and more to the state or national economy. You can't just get a grant for a truck because you're starting a cleaning business. That is not, grant funders expect that to be a normal startup cost for people. So what I counsel clients that are in those very beginning stages that call me, I tell them that if they're working on anything that's related to startup, whether it's buying equipment, buying transportation, getting a building, they really need to look to a source like the Small Business Administration or some other source for funding, a loan, something like that, because, again, nobody is going to go to you when you first start knowing the risks associated with starting a small business. Nobody's going to go to you and say, yeah, I'll just give you money even though I have no idea if you're going to be successful. That just isn't going to happen. So it's that reality check again. And also, small businesses really need to have collaborative partners. Again, the best chance a small business has to get grant funding is to collaborate with nonprofits, with other people that can help them have a larger impact. So that's really, really important. Other tips, again, like I told you just now, I explained other types of funding to them. There are various other types of funding. One is angel or venture capital investing. Now, there's a downside to every type of funding, including grant funding. But angel funding or venture capital oftentimes wants to take a portion of your business. So that is a downside for a lot of people, especially entrepreneurs who are very much in love with their product or their service. Angel investing would not necessarily demand a part of the business, but it's a lot harder to find, and it's very competitive. SBA funding. There's an SBA office, an SBDC office in almost every major metropolitan, I'd say every major metropolitan area, and even some smaller cities. And I often just go on the web when I'm talking to the person and say, here's the closest one to you. So one tip I can give you is that if you can give them information, if you can give them somewhere to turn, it makes them a lot more comfortable with not being able to get grant funding, because a lot of times they're grasping at straws anyway. They don't know what they want. So if you give them a direction to go, a lot of them appreciate that. Also, local business plan competitions. There are more and more of these coming around. One big one is the St. Louis Arch Grants program. It's one that's nationally known. It's a very large award. It is based on business plans. So what I tell clients is if you don't have a business plan, go to your local SBDC office. They'll help you develop one for free. That will help you possibly get some SBA funding. But again, if you can get in with one of these local business plan competitions, incubators a lot of times have these. So if it's a technology-related business, maybe you can apply through a business plan competition through an incubator, a local incubator. And then I think crowdfunding has really risen to be a good source of funding for some specific initiatives. Technology-related, consumer products-related types of products I've seen some successful crowdfunding campaigns for those. You have to be able to appeal to a certain audience to get crowdfunding, but if there is a good, solid audience there, I often encourage people to check out Kickstarter or one of the crowdfunding sites. Again, it's risky, but so is grant funding, and so is any loan you're going to get. So I think it's a viable alternative for some people. One thing I do encourage is for people to use a checklist to vet a small business request. Now, after taking so many of these calls, I kind of have the same questions that I go through with every one of these clients, but I thought maybe I'd put them down on paper here so you guys could what you would need to ask them. So in the checklist, we have a number of questions here, but is your business a research and development company or one affiliated with new technologies or energy efficiency? This kind of covers this energy, technology, research and development type of company. So if they say yes, then you will likely have some ability to go out and at least look for some funding, see if something might be coming down the pike. Do you have 3 years audited financials? Again, with the vast majority of for-profit funding, you're going to need at least 3 years of audited financials. If they ask you why, ask them or tell them that, if it's kind of like going to the bank with a loan. If you had no history of having any sort of loan or any sort of success paying bills, or you were 16 and just starting to drive and you hadn't even had a car, a car payment or anything like that, would a bank give you a loan? And most people look and say, well, no, you don't have any background. And that's what I tell them. If you don't have 3 years of audited financials, the funder is not going to be comfortable in the fact that you are an established business. Do you have an updated strategic and business plan? Now, this is, again, this was part of the solution for the client that Rachel and I worked with. I do think that this is important. Not all small businesses are going to have a strategic plan, but they do at a minimum need a business plan. This can help them in a number of ways. Again, with loans, it will definitely help them if they have a really well-written business plan. By the way, one of the services that I've provided to some of my clients are editing their business plans. A lot of small businesses have put together business plans, and quite honestly, they're not very good. And so if they're not wanting to go to an SBDC for whatever reason, or they don't have one close, I have actually written projects to go and edit and rewrite clients' business plans, which we're all good writers, so it is a good use of our talents. Is your mission statement established, clear, and precise? Let me go back up to the strategic plan for a second. Some small businesses will say, yep, I developed a strategic plan. Okay, let me see it. Well, they go and dig through all their files, find it at the bottom of the pile, got a lot of dust on it, and I ask them, how long has it been since you looked at this? Oh, we put it together with a consultant, I don't know, 3 or 4 years ago when we were thinking about the business. We haven't touched it since. You really do have to have an updated plan. Whether it's a strategic plan or a business plan, make sure your plan is updated. Make sure that it is one that you have looked at in the last month, 2 months. If you're looking for funding, you really should be going back to your strategic plan or your business plan anyway to make sure the project you're looking at aligns with it. But make sure your strategic plan and your business plan are updated. Okay, so your mission statement. If you have a strategic plan, you have a mission statement. So is your mission statement established, clear, and precise? And this is important because in a lot of for-profit funding applications, you're asked to state the organization's mission in some way, shape, or form. Sometimes they directly ask you to outline the organization's mission. This is similar to nonprofits, and the reason why for-profit funders, I've seen this on state economic development applications even, the reason why they want to know this is they want to know that you know where you're going, that you have a direction, and that you've taken the time to at least think through what your mission is going to be. And then they also look for consistency with the project that you're proposing to the mission, similar to what they do on nonprofit applications. So that is a place where the for-profit world has really learned from the nonprofit world. So make sure your mission statement is established, clear, and precise. So the next part of your grant readiness checklist, does your project align with your mission? So again, you take a look at your mission, or have your client take a look at their mission, and then take a look at their project. If they are proposing, I don't know, if they're proposing tutoring services for a group of after-school kids and their mission is to provide car seats for hospitals, how do the two match? You know, it doesn't match up. So this is where we need to look and make sure that the project aligns with the mission. If it doesn't, it's going to be a huge red flag for the funders. Do you have a project plan? I actually have a project planning tool that I have. If you go to my website, on the upper right-hand corner, there's a place that you can click and get my project planning tool. It's a checklist, and it outlines all of the elements that a for-profit company needs to look for to increase their chances of getting funding. So it goes through things like the project, the basic activities, the budget, the outcomes. So who are you going to impact by doing the project? It goes through the so how many jobs are going to be created or how many jobs are going to be retained. So basically you can go through that project planning checklist or have your client go through that, and that will give them a good idea of what they need to consider. But you should always have a project plan. You should always know that you're going to do this in this time frame, you're going to have these resources, you're going to have this outcome, and you're going to get it done within a certain amount of time, and it's going to cost a certain amount of money. It can be as basic as that, but there should be a project plan. And then I go through some of the needs identified by for-profit funders. Jobs created, capital investment. Again, it has to be tied to a significant impact, not just good for your pocketbook. Short-term increase in tax base or a long-term increase in tax base. So this would be the case with additional jobs. Sometimes with expanded markets, sometimes a for-profit will go into a new market and decide that it's going to be an increase in revenues, which is going to be an increase in taxes for the state, and you know, so that all is an increase in tax base, and they can hire more people, which means more people are employed, again, increased taxes. One example I can give you is I was working with it was a small company, less than 100. And they did recycling, plastic bottle recycling, and they applied through a state economic funding source to get a grant for a new piece of equipment that allowed them to divert significantly more plastic bottles from landfills. They would be able to reuse the plastic bottles, It basically had a cleaning and sanitizing step at the end of the process that allowed the bottle to be reused, and they wouldn't have to take it and dump it in the landfill. So it was and they ended up getting a $250,000 grant for that. So energy efficiency, that's another one. USDA has a lot of funds, especially in rural areas, for energy efficiency type initiatives. So some solar, geothermal. If a client's looking at putting in an energy efficient piece of equipment, there might be grant funding for that. Another question to ask is, do you have enough cash on hand to wait until the grant is awarded? This is really important because, especially with small businesses and startup businesses, even if they do apply for a grant, they don't necessarily understand that a grant doesn't just come to you right away. A lot of times, especially when you're dealing with state grants, they might be reimbursement grants. So you might have to spend all the money up front and then wait 3 to 6 months to get a reimbursement. And that's for a lot of companies, that's not doable. They don't have the cash flow to make that happen. So I always encourage clients to look at their cash flow and make sure that they can cash flow whatever the investment is, even if it takes a year to get the funding. Because I tell them it can, with states especially, it can take up to a year to get the funding. And then, do you have the resources to handle grant reporting? I always take them to that back page of the grant, the RFP that says, here's all the reports you're going to have to fill out. And a lot of them are quarterly reports. They require them to keep very detailed files. They require them to keep an audit trail of all expenses. They require the financials to be segregated for any grant funding expenditures. So I explain this. Again, this is all this information piece, because businesses don't understand what it takes to either get or manage a grant. So I explain that to them and say, do you have somebody that has to do this? A lot of small businesses are 2 to 3 people, and they're going 15 different directions. So if they don't have the resources to handle the reporting, I really encourage them to wait and get bigger before they try to get a grant. So again, do you have a way to segregate grant expenditures? And also, can you partner with a nonprofit? And again, I can't emphasize this enough. If you are working with a for-profit business, you can go on grants.gov. If they do have a very high-impact type of project that they're doing, go on to grants.gov, and all the SBIR opportunities are on there. You can actually sort by for-profit business, and just see those opportunities. And you can see, you can go to the closed and archive and see if they've got ones that come every year. A lot of the ones for for-profit businesses involve like education, so STEM initiatives. So if, for example, you're working with a small business that provides educational materials for technical training, that might be somebody that could partner with either a consortium that's going for grant funding to help provide STEM education to underserved or underprivileged kids. So maybe that for-profit could be a provider or a subcontractor for somebody in that grant, and then their services could be paid for through the grant, and then they can help further the outcomes for the grant funder. So really you need to look for that win-win. You need to see where that for-profit business can fit that it can be a winning initiative. Another example is in the healthcare industry. You see a lot of collaborative grants now in the healthcare industry. So I have had small businesses call me that are working on technologies for improving healthcare, especially in rural communities. And I tell them to go talk to their local hospital, go talk to local people, see what kind of grants they're applying for, and talk to the people they're selling to. See if they're able to apply for a grant. And again, this would be where a small business could benefit from partnering with another for-profit or a large nonprofit. So, Rachel, did you have anything to add here?
Not there. I think that you basically covered everything. Do you want me to just finish it up and then?
You can, yeah.
Sure. Okay, so basically, as Micki thoroughly shared, with the checklist, I think that that's a very, very, very useful tool because it really outlines for them, how they need to be prepared. We talk a lot about grant readiness for nonprofits, but what do we need to be grant ready as a for-profit entity? And I think that this is a really good way for them to understand the scope of services, that it's not just we're going to apply for a grant. well, what do you need to have prepared? How can you increase your chances for success? What are some of the considerations that you need to have? So those are the kind of things that are really important to have at the ready. And so in terms of the service offering, so let's say it works and your client's ready to move forward and says, okay, so how can you help us? So really it's taking the experience that you have and leveraging that. As I mentioned before, as grant professionals, we're constantly working on different projects. There's multiple different tasks that we are able to do and have the capacity to do. And how can we translate into the for-profit environment? So we have to be a little bit creative and also understand the needs of the for-profit client a little bit more. So as Micki shared before, the business and strategic plan development, just how an organization has to up their strategic plan and make sure that they have a path for success and maintenance of existing programs, and making sure that they understand their goals and their vision and it's clearly articulated. The same needs to be for the for-profit entity. If they're working on a project, if they want to take some initiative to expand their business, how are they going to do that? What exactly can they articulate for that line of business? And is that something that you can help them with? Is that something that you can do to help them grow and establish that strategic plan, that business plan? And a lot of the components are similar to what you would see in the nonprofit sector, except you might be using different lingo that's applicable to for-profit entity versus nonprofit. But it still requires stakeholder approval, requires additional review of the economic situation, financials, talking with different stakeholders. So those are the things that you would need to become aware of. And another one is the partner identification, determining who are some collaborators they could be working with, and that takes an understanding of some market research. Are these going to be nonprofit partners? Are they going to be for-profit partners? Who would be the best fit? And also understanding the geographic area. Are you going to need to yourself partner with someone who might have more of awareness of that geographic area? If you're located in New York and the client is located in Massachusetts, are you going to need to find someone in that area who can help you identify some and doing that market research? And also needs assessments. So if they have a solution or initiative that they want to start using, what is the need for it? What is the purpose for it? So just like you do a needs assessment where you review the demographics, you review different indicators to determine that you have a target population that's in need and here's why. The same thing needs to be done for the for-profit as well, and determining why the solution is going to provide the best service or provide an unmet need that is currently out there. And also referrals. So, are there connections, are there networking, are there different awareness of the sector that you have that you can share with them and provide them with that information so that they can be successful in pursuing this initiative or project that they have. And also project planning. So just similar as you would put together a project plan or put together a task matrix, you would do the same in the for-profit. So if you're going to be working on a strategic plan for them, putting together either some kind of charter, some kind of task matrix, some kind of plan to outline the responsibilities, to outline the goals of your work together, ensure that everybody understands all the different activities, what are the deadlines for meeting this, what are some key comments or information that could really influence how those activities are completed. And also case statements, similar to putting together an application, a case statement is really building upon the business plan. Now that you have a business plan, how are you going to articulate that to potential partners or to potential funders? How are you going to build that case statement, including all the different elements of your needs assessment, your collaborative partners, your goals and objectives, and your outcomes, and how is that all going to put together for a case statement so that you can then articulate that to people to get the additional funding? And another one that is also something that you work with for-profit partners on is also contracts. So, when I was working at Deloitte, I worked on a number of different RFP responses for federal engagements. So we had to put together, similar to a grant application, there's very basic common elements for each of the different responses. And the same thing, if you're doing that for a for-profit firm, is that they have to be a lot of reviews. You're going to have a lot of collaborative partners. You're going to have a lot of people at the table with their input. So you need to come up with a common theme, common solution, common way of describing it so that you can pull that together for them. And with that, I'm going to finish up, and then I'm going to open up for questions. So if anybody has anything that they would like to share, please let us know, and we'll be happy to address any questions. And I just also want to thank you for your participation and appreciate it. And Micki, do you want to add anything?
Just really quickly, I know everybody has a handout that Kelly sent, and again, thank you, Kelly, for facilitating this. Kelly always does a fantastic job. She's very well organized and keeps us all very organized with this. You did get a handout that is a grant readiness checklist for for-profit companies. So take a look at it. If you have any questions, contact me. My email is Micki@lakeviewconsulting.net. It's MICKI at lakeviewconsulting.net. So if you have any questions about using that checklist, but one thing I want to make sure you understand is it isn't necessarily a bad thing for you if a client can't check something positively. That is always a new opportunity to help them out. So if somebody says, I don't have a strategic plan, maybe you can help them, or maybe you can contact another grant consultant that can help them. If somebody says, well, I don't really have a good project plan, I've done a lot of project planning. Rachel's done a lot of project planning. So, I mean, there are people within GPA to help you out. And if you're ever in doubt, contact, and I'm sure Kelly will love that I'm telling her this, but the GPA office, the National GPA office, is extremely responsive. If you ever have a question, or you can go to the GPA website and you can look on Find a Consultant, and you can look for some basic types of categories people write to. But if you really want to know specific capabilities, either start asking your fellow chapter members, or go to the GPA office and say, do you know anybody that has some experience in this with small businesses? And they can definitely direct you to somebody. But there are people, so it isn't necessarily a bad thing if clients aren't ready for grants yet. This is just an opportunity for you to help them be ready. So I wanted to make that point, and I, like Rachel, thank everybody for joining us this afternoon, and we are very happy to take questions in this last 8 or so minutes we have.
Thank you, ladies, so much. Again, if you do have a question, please feel free to put them in the chat box, or you can. There should be a raise your hand button. You can raise your hand, and we'll get your line unmuted. Also, if you don't have a question right now, but it comes up later, feel free to email myself at kelly@grantprofessionals.org. Or a staff@grantprofessionals.org, and we will get them over to Rachel and Micki so they can help answer those questions.
Rachel.
Okay, here comes a question.
Well, I'm going to have to look, Latifa. I will look real quick. Anybody else has got a question, that'll give me an opportunity to look here.
So Latifa was asking, where is the project planning tool you referenced on your website? I can't seem to locate it. So Micki will be looking for that. And again, while we're waiting, you all will be receiving the recorded version of this, so you can listen again. And it is an unlisted link that will be sent to you from YouTube, so only those with the link can view it. We ask that you don't share it because non-members do have to pay. It is a member benefit for you to attend these webinars for free. So if you do have a colleague that is interested, please feel free to refer them to our website, and they can register online.
Latifa, I just redid my website, so I have to apologize. I wasn't as familiar with the new format as I thought I was. If you go to the middle, it's right across from the grant writing section. It says Free Grant Writing Project Planning Template. So that is where that template is, and if you click on the download now, that's where you'll get the sign-up thing, and you'll be able to download that. It's a PDF. Or not PDF, I'm sorry, a Word document, I believe. And if you have any more problems, just contact Kelly. She'll get with me, and we'll make sure, or you can email me, and then she can make sure that she can get it. And you're welcome.
Perfect. Okay, well, I don't see anybody else, any other questions. So again, if you do have questions, please feel free to just to send them to staff@grantprofessionals.org, and we'll get them over to Micki and Rachel. We want to be mindful of everybody's time today. So that concludes our webinar today. We ask that each of you remain with us a few moments longer to complete the short survey on your screen. Please take a few moments to evaluate the webinar and the presenters and provide us with any topics for our future webinars. We have this year fully booked, but we're always looking for topics for next year, or if we have a cancellation, we can plug that in. Rachel and Micki, we would like to thank you so much for all of your time that you've put into this and your willingness to share all of your information.
Thanks
Kelly, to all of you. Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Bye,
and thanks to all who have attended. We're glad that you can join us and hope that this session was helpful for you. Remember that this webinar qualifies for 1 credit towards the GPC CEU. Have a wonderful rest of your day, everyone. Bye.
Bye.